The old man chewed his pipe and held his rod over the side of the skiff. So far he'd not felt as much as a nibble at the end of his line and cursed himself for sleeping in a little longer this morning. He looked back to shore to see his daughter paddling in the surf. She smiled and waved and cupped her hands to shout something, but he couldn't make it out. His hearing had never been great, but it was getting a lot worse. He put down his rod and tapped the contents of his pipe overboard. As he watched the stale tobacco drift away, he caught sight of something beneath the surface. Silver darlings darting this way and that. His luck had turned. Finally, something worth catching. He took up his rod again and cast off. He looked back to shore excitedly, but his daughter had stopped smiling and waving. She was screaming. Tears reddened her cheeks as she screamed and screamed, but he couldn't hear a thing. He stumbled as the boat was buffeted by something under the water, something big. Maybe a thresher was chasing the silver darlings. That's what had them spooked. He looked into the water again. Nothing. He looked back at his daughter. She had her head in her hands. She couldn't watch. He spun round to look behind him. And it all happened so fast. He felt himself being pushed backwards, felt himself go under, then saw the great maw rising up from the deep. On the shore, his daughter raised her head from her hands. The water was still. Her father and his skiff were gone. Hello, and welcome to the Bad Spot, where I, Matt Risby, and I alone, am playing through Ironsworn. And this is the final part of this mini-campaign, where I have been revisiting the very first game I ever played nearly 4 years ago, to see if a bit of experience might see it shake out differently. Before we crack on, please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon to be notified when the next video drops. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind the scenes content, and your name on screen, like these lovely people. So full disclosure, I do enjoy a cliffhanger, and regular viewers will know this. They're a lot of fun to come up with, and I like to tantalise you all with them, but good God, do I paint myself into a corner sometimes, which is why sometimes episodes can take a while, because I have to spend the time leading up to recording trying to figure out a way to extricate myself from the narrative tangle that I'm tied up in. Well, this last cliffhanger was a doozy. Tio has to retrieve the fangs of Anatu, and we knew they were in Brigand's Rest somewhere, but now we have found out that not only are there hundreds of murderous bandits standing in our way, but the fangs of Anatu themselves, the very thing that we need to retrieve, are hanging around the neck of a wyvern, which, for all intents and purposes, is a dragon, right? Let's not mess around. I can't just go up to it politely and ask for it back. It will eat Tio's face. So what was initially a hard problem to solve has rapidly become next to impossible. And all because I thought it would be a cool cliffhanger. So that's on me. That's my bad. So yeah, it's been a while since the last episode because I've been thinking about how Tio is going to go about this kind of in-game to try and figure out. And whilst I was thinking, I've had this kind of niggling thought in my head. Because he needs a break, right? He needs something. And I kept just thinking that there's something that I did in an earlier episode that was going to help me. And I looked through my notes and I couldn't kind of remember what it was from any of the childish scrawls that I'd made. And I kind of couldn't remember. So I had to go back and listen. And I actually discovered that there was this little bit of excellent forward thinking from past Risby to help future Risby out. This was from Chapter 1, after my encounter with the Brute in Mournstone. and he uses the effort of kicking the beam to roll out of the way as the gable finally collapses, and what is left of the roof caves in, crushing the brute under a heap of burning wood and masonry. Tio gets to his feet, exhausted by the effort of the fight. And here's a thought I just had. Should we steal this guy's outfit? Like, should we steal his mask and his scarf? They're quite distinct, and I'm kind of wondering whether we should, because that could very well come in handy later if we ever want to find ourselves blending in or being disguised amongst a bunch of bandits. So we're going to do that. Well, thanks very much, Past Risby, you absolute legend. That will definitely come in handy. Yes, I have a disguise. Now, it doesn't solve the wyvern problem. That is something very much looming in the future. I'm, to be honest, trying not too hard to think about, but at least now we have some sort of chance of being able to move in and around Brigand's Rest. And I'm actually going to give that to myself as progress and reach a milestone. I didn't know it at the time, but taking this bandit outfit definitely counts as acquiring a vital resource. So that takes us up to 6 out of 10 on our bow. So it's getting dark, and Tio is up and away from all the action. He's observing this place from afar, and he's kind of gotten a bit distracted by the task at hand. That task being to retrieve the tines, and the problem being that not only are they deep in enemy territory, they are around the neck of a giant monster. So it turns out that these bandits weren't actually in the business of killing the Leviathan or even driving it off. It's actually just coincidental. They have their own great beast, and they are looking to use the fangs of Anatu to control it, and then who knows what. Probably expand their reign of terror across the Ironlands. That's, I think, the most likely explanation for them trying to tame a wyvern. And this kind of whole wyvern angle, this idea, all, by the way, came out of a little line in the Ironsworn rulebook when I was looking up the wyverns, and I can't remember exactly what it says, but so I'll kind of throw it up on screen for you. But it's a quest starter or a truth, I think, about you finding ancient artwork depicting wyverns with saddles. And when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, what if they aren't using the fangs to face down the Leviathan? What if they're trying to break a wyvern? And why would they? It's to kind of wield an almighty power. And then from there, that actually adds an extra complication on top of what is actually already quite hard. But it makes it pretty interesting because narratively, the implications of not retrieving the tines are now much greater, because if Tio doesn't, not only will the Leviathan be free to run amok every time it returns to this region, there will actually now be an all-powerful faction lording it up over the area. And that faction's going to be led by someone crazy enough to be riding around on a wyvern. So it's kind of now a thing. And Tio is feeling pretty pessimistic about his chances, and it's kind of hard to blame him, but what choice does he have? Kuno is gone. He is alone, except for the ghost, and the ghost, as we have established before, hates him. So he is truly, truly on his own. And we need to get to this main island. It's the one at the centre of this little ring of islands. The island that Tio is on now is not connected to the others. Remember, there are these kind of towering pillars of rock that are all connected by rope bridges, but we're on sort of like a kind of like a shorter one. It's kind of sort of an outlier. We're on an island that's set apart from the others, and if you remember, we found all this loot in the cave where we landed, and I'm wondering if we might be able to try and maybe kind of scoop some of this loot up and take it somewhere kind of into the main kind of complex as if we're dropping it off. And I wonder whether, kind of while we're up there on this vantage point, whether or not Tio might be able to kind of try and study the comings and goings at the docks to see if there is any rhyme or reason to things here. Like, there's clearly a lot of activity. There's lots of comings and goings. But is there any kind of order? Is there any semblance of a process? So I think Tio takes up his spyglass again. And he watches the boats coming in, and he watches the boats going out. And this is going to trigger a move. This move is Secure an Advantage, which says when you assess a situation, make preparations or attempt to gain leverage, envision your action and roll. And this is definitely going to be with observation and insight. So let's secure an advantage rolling plus wits. It's a weak hit. So on a weak hit, your advantage is short-lived. Take +1 momentum. And we are noted enjoyers of momentum on this show. And that little bump takes us up to, I think, 5, which is, it's okay. We need to build it up because we're about to do some dangerous stuff. So that's a good start. So I think because we didn't get a strong hit, I think that this is reflected by perhaps Tio watching for a while, watching the kind of little dinghies coming in and maybe meeting larger boats further out and kind of going to and fro. And it's very busy. And it's kind of almost as if, right? Almost as if that these people are trying to unload this stuff and leave as quickly as possible, almost as if the sea in this region is going to be suddenly unsafe or something very shortly. Who knows? But there is a lot of coming and going, a lot of goods being unloaded, and I think it's actually quite chaotic. And I think that there's people frantically trying to offload their goods. Maybe there's also a good number of people trying to find somewhere to stay. Like they won't be able to make the journey back wherever they've come from. So they are like trying to reach this very unlikely safe haven of sorts and kind of arguing about whether they can stay or not. And these people are like desperate and it's getting pretty heated down on the main dock. And I think that's what Tio's gleaned from this. He's not going to have to figure out the order of things or what the process is to try and fit in. He's actually going to have to do the opposite and take advantage of the chaos. And that chaos is going to bring its own challenges, but also its own narrative opportunities. So Tio, suddenly, as if from nowhere, remembers that he has a bandit uniform in his satchel and he digs it out. And remember, it's this kind of like weird white skull-like mask and a scarf, which is kind of like in a reptilian kind of hide. And it's got a bit of blood on it, obviously, which he kind of notices and wipes off because he doesn't want to look any more suspicious than he does. And he kind of suits up. And I think he kind of hits upon this idea of the loot and goes back down to the cave and picks up whatever looks like it might be like worth the most. Like there's maybe a little chest, maybe. I think maybe like Kuno, as she was going through it, she popped the lock on one, but didn't take it or what was inside. And I think around there's like some trinkets and Tio just starts grabbing anything shiny, basically like a magpie, like goblets, candlesticks, like a gauntlet from a suit of armor, just anything that looks valuable. And then I think that dawns on him that like he's now kind of suddenly hoping that this stuff is actually valuable to the bandits and it hasn't just been abandoned here because it's worthless. Like he's hoping that maybe they've just got too much loot and this is like the surplus. Because, yeah, that would be bad if that was the case. So he loads up and then he works his way around the island. Like where we landed on kind of this kind of far side, as it were, was pretty well hidden and off to the side or whatnot. But now he's moved round to the shoreline, where other boats that have passed through that great stone arch that we described, they'll pass by this point. Because this is the most direct route into Brigand's Rest. And Tio, who's kind of holding his little chest full of goodies under one arm, and kind of like trying not to hyperventilate in this mask, he doesn't have to wait too long until a boat comes through the arch. Its torch lighting the way through the dark. Tio waves to flag it down. It's a longish skiff, crewed by maybe 4 or 5 desperate-looking folks, desperate to get off the water, tired after a long day or several days rowing to get here from wherever they came from. They look scared, and as Tio waves for them to pull over, they comply swiftly. And as they get closer, he can see them. They are all trembling with fear. The men and women on this boat cower in his presence. It takes Tio, like a split second to realise that it's the outfit that they're scared of, and who knows how these people and all these other people in the Ironlands have suffered at the hands of these bandits dressed as he is now. One of them on the boat, their hands trembling, motions to a canvas that's covering their cargo, as if he thinks like Tio is there to like inspect it. And Tio has to kind of play along and kind of moves in as menacingly as he can to look. And what's there? What do they have? Like, is it something that's kind of tied to Brigand's Rest in some way? Are they like making an offering to the bandits, or even an offering to the Wyvern, like some meat? I think maybe some like meat or something. I think maybe these like are simple farmers or whatever, and they've come all this way to kind of pay tribute. And as they pull back the canvas and Tio looks aboard, underneath he sees there's these kind of like calves or these lamb carcasses, these tiny like emaciated things. It's all these people had. It's all they can offer, and they're doing so maybe in the hope that their village or wherever they're from, their settlement, will be spared the wrath of the bandits, the wrath of the Wyvern. And Tio has to not react. So he just kind of nods menacingly. And then he holds the boat with his foot and climbs aboard and like wordlessly motions for them to keep moving towards the central island. And he's going to have to hitch a ride. And it's a short, tense journey. They pass many other boats, people who have either dropped off their goods, their tributes, or have been turned away. They've been kind of sent back to take their chances on the open water. And as Tio and the others draw nearer to the central island, he hears the mighty roar from the beast trapped within. And it's sort of this kind of half screech, half wail, because there's power there, sure, yeah, and anger, but there's also fear and mourning. This thing is a terrible, ancient, dangerous creature, but it's also trapped and frightened. When they finally arrive at the dock, it's absolute bedlam. It's absolute chaos. There's bandits arguing with people as they're arriving. There are like goods just being tipped into the water, those that have been deemed useless. There's pushing and shoving, an awful lot of commotion. And they kind of force their way into dock and hitch a rope. And Tio kind of gets off, and he's just going to stride purposefully past the bandits guarding the stairs leading up to the fortress. He's thought about it on the row over, and that's his play. He is just going to walk. He's going to act natural and go, because for all intents and purposes, as he's dressed, he is one of them going about his duties, so he is just going to have to act like it. So, this is going to be a move. What's it going to be? Now, first I thought it might be compel, because we are kind of attempting to persuade someone, kind of to swindle them, so it could be compel rolling plus shadow, but it's probably actually face danger, which says when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And then if we act with deception, stealth, or trickery, roll plus shadows. And we'll also bring in our infiltrator asset, which says when you make a move to breach, traverse, or hide within an area held by an enemy force, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. So we're rolling with a +4. So let's face danger, rolling plus shadow. Weak hit, which will do, I think. Yeah, so it says on a weak hit you succeed, but face a troublesome cost, and then we get to choose one. Firstly, we'll take that bonus momentum from our infiltrator asset because it was a hit, so our momentum is up to 6. And I think that the cost here from the options available is going to be harm. And the reason that I think it's harm is I think that, like, as Tio strolls confidently past the bandits on the dock, and like he's just carrying his little chest, which is like the size of like a largish shoebox, he is stopped by another bandit. And there's this kind of split second where Tio thinks that this is it. He's been like kind of discovered straight away. But what it actually is that the bandits have seen him carrying one measly chest, and they just start loading him up with the stuff from the dock like he's a mule, like putting heavy bags over each shoulder and round his neck. And I think that means he's going to have to climb this narrow, steep stone staircase up to the fortress, like completely laden down with like 50 kilos worth of extra weight. So what we'll do is, like, if we'll endure harm, which says you are tired or hurt, take 1 harm. So that bumps our health down to 3. And of course, we must not forget, because this is original Ironsworn, to make the endure harm move, which says when you face physical damage, suffer health equal to your foe's rank or as appropriate to the situation, then roll plus health or plus iron, whichever is higher. So our health is 3, which is definitely higher than our iron, so let's go with that. Okay, that is a miss, so we also suffer -1 momentum. So easy come, easy go on that momentum, back down to 5. That didn't last very long. And I guess this kind of makes sense. It's going to be like a big kind of slog to get up these steps. And not only is it tiring, it takes a while, and time is of the essence, so a hit to our momentum, it makes a lot of sense. It's a long, narrow, steep set of stairs, and with all this stuff, he just has to labour up one step at a time. And it's precarious, especially as kind of like other bandits are coming and going, and they're just sort of kind of knocking into him, annoyed that they're kind of being slowed down by him. And each step he gets closer to the top, he can hear the wyvern, its roar, like growing in volume and intensity, and it's exhausting. And when he reaches the top, he just sort of doubles over, kind of like dizzy and breathless with the effort, and kind of barely able to stay on his feet. And he dumps all this stuff off him, and his shoulders and arms are screaming, and he kind of takes a moment to catch his breath. But before he can kind of recover, he's clocked by some more bandits who are just angrily pointing in the direction of like where he's got to go, which is kind of like this like a storehouse type structure, I guess. And it's just inside the walls of the fortress, and this is where he is being told he has to take this stuff. And there are other people going in and out. It's the biggest building within the fortress, I think, and you can see from here that some of the roof has collapsed. But the building, even with that section of collapsed roof, is big enough to shelter kind of more than half of what's inside, let's say. You can see behind the building in the distance, there is the guards patrolling the walls, and there are guards up on the two remaining towers. There was 4 towers, and there's 2 remaining. And he kind of quickly tries to kind of assess what's going on and take a rough head count, but he kind of stops at about 25 before he's being forced to haul this stuff over to the warehouse. And now he's dragging it more than carrying it, right? Like it's a sorry state of affairs. No one is kindly offering to give him a hand. They're just bandits going about bandit business, which is actually good for Tio, because it means that people aren't really paying him much attention, and that's the kind of opportunity he can exploit. And the wyvern roars again, and I think Tio, for the first time, I think notices that none of the other bandits react. Like, they're either used to it or not afraid of it, and he's going to have to try and kind of do that too if he doesn't want to give himself away. So he finally reaches this warehouse kind of storeroom type place, and there is someone at the door. There's someone in charge of this situation, and they're checking things in and out. And I just want to make this clear. This isn't someone trying to maintain a detailed inventory, like someone doing a big stock take. This is more someone just kind of directing all these people to dump stuff into one of maybe half a dozen massive unruly piles of stuff. And Tio sees as he kind of gets through the doorway, kind of crosses the threshold, that this is quite the Aladdin's cave. But it isn't gold and trinkets. It's because there's not much of that stuff in the Ironlands. like these are all piles of like functional, practical objects like weapons, tools, armor, raw materials, all that kind of stuff. And next to each of these piles in this cavernous kind of warehouse are more bandits, and they are kind of frantically sorting through it all. And it's really busy in here. And that Tio quickly counts that there's another like half a dozen or so bandits of like various descriptions. And the other thing kind of you notice is, and this is kind of, I think, by far the most pertinent thing about this scene, is that it's really dark in here. And with the collapsed roof that only covers like the half of the building where they are, like towards the back, that's probably just all vacant space, and it's in total darkness. And Tio is betting that if he can slip away momentarily in the shadows, he thinks that the building's probably damaged enough for there to be a way out on the other side. And from there, he can head further into the fortress. So I think we are going to actually try and figure out if that is something we could do. And I think here is where we might use Mila, or Mila might choose to be involved. And as Tio is walking between these kind of piles of stuff, and he kind of dropping each thing off where it kind of vaguely looks like it needs to go, I think he's going to take a look as hard as he can for some sort of way out. But because it's so dark, he's going to hope that Mila's spectral light will guide him. So we're going to make a move, and once again that move is Secure an Advantage, which says when you assess a situation, make preparations, or attempt to gain leverage, envision your actions, and roll. So this is again with expertise, insight, or observation. We'll also bring in our Spirit-bound asset, which says you are haunted by someone whose death you caused through your actions or failures. When you consult with their spirit to secure an advantage or gather information, add +1 and take +2 momentum on a hit. So let's secure an advantage, rolling plus wits. A strong hit. It says on a strong hit you gain advantage. Choose one. We can either take control with +1 on another move, or take +2 momentum, and we will exploit our asset a little bit here, and we'll take the +1 on the move because we already get +2 on the momentum from Mila. So that puts us up to 7 momentum, and that move that I will make now and then fold into the narrative with the result of this roll is Face Danger, which says when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And we're going to be acting with deception, stealth, or trickery. So we're going to be rolling plus shadow, and once again we will bring our infiltrator asset into play too. So we have a mighty +5 modifier on this, and in the past that's never really done me any favors. I always fail these rolls. So let's Face Danger, rolling plus shadow. A strong hit. On a strong hit, you are successful. Take +1 momentum, and then we also get +1 from the asset. So that puts us all the way up to 9. That pleases me greatly. We are going to need that momentum for a crucial juncture, I'm sure. So we took a chance, and it worked out, and now we just have to take the next one. So let's envision this. So Tio is dragging his stuff between the piles, and I think that one of the big sacks that he's been kind of hauling up, one of the ones that the bandits at the bottom of the stairs just kind of heaped on him, it's very nearly overflowing, and I think that's what he's going to use. And he kind of just sort of accidentally lets it drop in kind of the path of the other people behind him, and the contents spill out on the floor, kind of sending bits of armor, let's say, that's in there, like kind of armor clanking all over the place, making the people who are kind of sorting out all this stuff kind of gather around and stop what they're doing and start trying to kind of tidy this up and get it all together. And they're kind of angrily cursing and pushing Tio aside for kind of disrupting whatever loose order there was in here. And that split second is all Tio needs. There's this momentary distraction, and for him, that's enough. He steps back from the commotion, kind of backing away into the shadows and just watching intently. That no one is focused on him, they're all focused on the commotion. And he slips away into the dark. And as he turns, he can see Mila's light guide the way. You can see that the building isn't just big, it is cavernous. It was probably a great hall at some point. But whatever fate befell this place and left the roof torn off has exposed what is left to the elements. And Mila's spectral glow dances around, illuminating a gaping chasm in the floor, one that appears to disappear deep into the rock below. And Tio steps carefully round it and works his way to the wall, which he hopes he can use to find his way to the corner of this building, because Mila shows him there is loose panelling in the damaged wall, easily big enough for him to slip through. Once he's out, he'll be in the fortress compound proper. He looks back to see if anyone has noticed him, but they've all just gone back to whatever they were doing, back to their organising. He takes a deep breath, steps through the gap. Once again, we hear the wyvern roar. It's closer, and Tio felt it, like in his chest, like reverberating through his bones. So I guess we're sort of like in a back alley, I guess. And the fortress is big, but it's not like a sprawling city centre or anything. It doesn't have streets and lots of buildings. It's seen better days, and what buildings there are crumbling and derelict, and the warehouse, badly damaged as it is probably the most intact, and that's kind of half collapsed. He looks kind of up and down the alley, and it's all clear. And it's dark enough that he can probably safely slink around in the shadows, but he knows he has no choice but to make his way towards the roaring of the great beast. He figures it must be very close, judging by the volume, but he's going to need to take a better look, and we're going to try and do that, I think. And to do that, I think he needs to get up to some sort of vantage point and see what the lay of the land is, to see if there's any like patrols or anything. What he needs to do is establish the geography of the fortress, right, and see what he can do. So I think he looks at the building opposite, the kind of the building that makes up the other side of the alleyway. I think I'll charitably say that there's also a damaged roof on that building and a partially kind of collapsed section that he can maybe hide in and see what is going on, perhaps without being seen by the patrolling guards on the wall, which are his biggest problem. So that's what he does. He finds a kind of a decent foothold and maybe a bit of old pipework to cling on to, and he scuttles up the side of this stone building fairly easily, and is now in a position where he can see what's going on. So once again, this is going to be secure an advantage as we try and figure out our next chance and how we're going to take it. And it's going to be with expertise, insight, and observation, so plus wits again. And I think we'll use Mila again. I think she's favouring Tio at the moment, so we may as well lean into it. So let's secure an advantage, rolling plus wits. Okay, that is a miss, and the 10 makes that a bad miss, because we could cancel the 8, but I really don't want to waste our momentum turning this into just a weak hit. I feel like we're going to need the momentum for a more critical moment. So we are just going to have to eat this one, I think. So on a miss, you fail or your assumptions betray you, pay the price. And I think there's no additional penalty for a miss on Mila's asset, I think. Yeah, it's just on a weak hit we endure stress. It doesn't say anything about a miss. So for now, we just fail, and our assumptions betray us. And I tell you what, I feel like because we used Mila, it makes perfect sense for her to betray us, doesn't it? I think that's what's going to happen here. So what does that look like? So we kind of make our way up to the section of collapsed roof, and we can get a good look. Like the fortress kind of interior, as it were, is lit pretty well by kind of torches and sconces and kind of fire pits around the place. And Tio can now see just what he's facing. Maybe 20 meters away from the building he's now on top of is a smaller row of buildings. And those buildings are like nearly completely wrecked. They're just kind of skeleton frames of buildings, really. And they form a ring at the center of the fortress complex. And inside this ring is the Iron Wyvern. It's shackled with lengths of cruel, heavy chain, and Tio can't kind of see exactly where it's tethered to. But the chains seem to run off in all directions and kind of in and through the frames of these buildings. And it roars again in anger and fear. And Tio can start, now he's a bit closer, he can start to get a sense of the size of this thing. And it's huge. It, like, if it could rear up to its full height, it would like tower well above all of these buildings. And he needs to figure out a way of getting over there. And that's the thing, isn't it? He kind of looks down, and I think in the alley below him, he now sees a few bandits passing by, and also from up here, he can kind of see the guards on the walls. So getting over there unseen is going to be a problem. It's going to be very difficult. But Mila shows him an opportunity, shows him a way over, because her light illuminates, running from somewhere in the eaves of the building that he's in now over to the smaller buildings is a length of rope. And he gives it a tug, and it seems sturdy enough. And he figures if he can cling to this rope, he can pull himself over pretty quickly. He still risks being seen, but it's a way over. And he decides to take the chance. And he quickly kind of holds on, hooks his legs over the rope, and he's kind of hanging upside down. And he starts pulling himself along, hand over hand. He's done this sort of thing many times before. He's kind of comfortable doing it, and he can make it across quickly. But as he reaches the middle, he's just trying to move quickly as he can. He feels it. He feels the telltale give in the rope. And he knows that somewhere at the end of the rope, in the direction where he just came from, the rope is fraying. And not only is it fraying, it is unwinding quickly. And he knows in that moment, Mila has led him astray. Now, falling from here would be curtains. He'd be seriously injured or killed outright by the fall. But he doesn't fall. He can feel the rope slackening, and then he drops. But he doesn't keep going. He clings on tight and braces for impact, but that impact doesn't come. The rope holds true at the other end. And instead, about 5 meters from the ground before he smashes into pieces in the alley below, he is jerked back through the air and swings towards the smaller buildings, and he crashes through what is left of a window, sending the frame splintering all around him. He lets go and kind of goes sprawling onto the floor. And there's kind of these rough, ruined, burnt out wooden floorboards that kind of creak and groan noisily as he comes to a stop. But as he does, they collapse, and he falls through the floor in a plume of dust and splinters. And as he kind of gets to his feet, coughs up all he's inhaled, checks he's okay, he realizes that he's now on the other side of those small buildings. He realizes where he is and where he was, and he realizes that somehow he's made it to where he needs to be. It's in less than ideal circumstances, and he rather would have done it more surreptitiously, but he made it. And let's not forget that we rolled a miss. Tio may well have made it, and he can now see the beast, and a clear path between him and the mighty creature. But that's not quite true, because there is actually something between them. And that something is a cadre of beast wranglers. These are heavy-set bandits, like maybe even more so than the other heavy-set bandits. They wear the white skull-like mask like the rest of them, but they're all shirtless, showing many scars and slashes, no doubt earned by keeping this and other creatures captive. There are 6 of them, and each carries a massive, long pole arm, each tipped with a barbed spike, which they must use to jab and corral the wyvern into submission. And they turn to see this man, dressed as one of them, as he is fallen through the ceiling into the room in which they are all stood. And Tio's mask has rolled off in the fall too, which really doesn't help him. They share a look between them, then lower their pole arms in his direction. And behind them, the wyvern roars. And Tio is now well and truly in trouble. So our cover's blown. We're outnumbered. We are outmatched. We need to steal a necklace off a dragon. And then somehow get out of here. And do you know what? It feels a little bit like the shit's hit the fan, doesn't it? And a little bit like this is a desperate situation. And I think that in times like these, when you find yourself in a bit of a tangle, in a bit of a predicament, you just kind of got to roll with it and maybe try and get a little crazy. And we're about to either be kebabbed by a bunch of beast tamers or eaten by the wyvern we're trying to rob. There is a third option, which is to run away and fight our way through like 100-odd bandits who are patrolling a fortress that's in the middle of the sea. So, of the options we have, none of them are what you'd call good. And in this instant, with like those odds, I think Tio has this kind of moment, this kind of moment of clarity of what's going on. We need the tines. Those tines are around the neck of a wyvern. So that's where he's going to go. Like, to him, I don't know whether it's like the certain death of the situation, but it's clear now, like, he might die, but the objective is to get the tines that are around the neck of a wyvern. So let's just do that. Let's go. Let's go and get them. He doesn't actually have much of a choice. We have to get past these wranglers and get to the wyvern. Once we get there, who knows? Like I keep saying, we take this chance and then we figure out the next one. And as I'm talking, Tio reaches into his sleeve and his fingers kind of find the handles of his throwing daggers. And with 3 in his hands, he swiftly flings them in the direction of the oncoming wranglers. And as he does, he finds his feet and starts to run, sprinting towards the wyvern. And this is a move. It's a very stupid move. And somewhat predictably, this move is going to be face danger. And of all the options it gives us, it could be rolling plus edge because we're acting quickly. And that would be better for us, like stats-wise. And it'd be better for us than what I think I'm going to have to pick. Because I think I'm going to have to pick plus iron. I think that this is an aggressive action involving forceful defense, strength, or endurance. This is a test of metal. It's an aggressive, like, alpha strike in the face of overwhelming odds. It is reckless, it's foolish, and it's unlikely to work. But it is what it is. We have a mighty +1 in iron, which is not ideal. And I don't think we can bring our infiltrator asset here because that infiltrator asset kind of implies that some sort of kind of stealth is being used, and we're absolutely not doing that. So let's Leroy Jenkins this shit. Right? We're here. Like, we may as well go down swinging. So let's face danger, rolling, plus iron. Well. Tio has leveraged his weakest stat into a situation with impossible odds. And fair play to him, he's absolutely crushed it, because that is a strong hit. It says on a strong hit, you are successful. Take +1 momentum. That puts us up to full momentum, right up to 10. So what does this reckless action look like? Well, I didn't expect it to work, so I've not really thought about it. So let's just kind of go with it. I suppose the knives we threw, they must have hit their mark, and I think that's a start. We threw 3 knives, so I mean, the wranglers were kind of like, they weren't charging in, they were just kind of moving slowly in. They're kind of big hulking brutes. And I think that the nearest 3 were stopped in their tracks by this blur of silver streaks that thud into them. They're only small knives, and these are big wranglers. So I don't think that it's anywhere near enough to take one out, but it's definitely enough to kind of give them something to think about, give them a short, sharp shock. And that's all Tio needs. Tio only ever needs a second to do anything. And as quick as a flash, he has made that second that the knives bought him count. And he is running past them, running towards the wyvern, once again towards. And he doesn't look back to see if he's being followed. He is just full on running at full pelt. And the wyvern has noticed this commotion and kind of turns in his direction. And he's not far away. So what's his next move? Well, he reaches behind him and he pulls the haft of the fangs of Anatu out of its wrapping that he's been keeping on his back, and he's running. He's running at full pelt. While he's doing that, he's trying to force these two parts together. And like the wyvern's really seen him now, like running towards its mouth, essentially, its big flat head with its hungry jaws. Like, this is a free meal. And Tio is still kind of sort of fumbling this together, and then he feels something. He feels a click. And the haft kind of just crunches and kind of whirs, almost like it's clockwork. And all of a sudden it feels like it has a weight to it. It has a heft that he didn't feel before when he was carrying it on his back. And ahead he can see the wyvern get up on its haunches, kind of stooping its head, its long neck snaking as it watches him approach, and it dwarfs him. It's ready for him. And then he can see those emerald green tines around its neck. They are so close. He doesn't know what he's going to do, but if he can get in close enough, maybe he can knock them loose. And that's all he really can do. The element of surprise is gone. Like, he's not going to stealth his way out of this. But somehow the haft is giving him some kind of power. He feels emboldened. Whatever strange energy is coursing through this thing, it's giving him the courage he needs. And I think we need to make another move. Another incredibly dangerous move. And it's face danger. There's no getting around that. And it absolutely could be edge. But I don't know, like, maybe because I'm feeling kind of emboldened by this magic haft, I'm starting to feel like thematically the right thing to do would be to roll like plus heart, because this is something that is requiring courage and bravery. And that's what I'm going to go with. So let's do it. Let's face danger, rolling plus heart. Well, the plan didn't work per se, in that we rolled a miss. And I do feel like the stakes are quite high here. So that miss could be very costly. So that momentum I've been saving all this time, we'll use that here. And it's high enough, it's maximum, so we can cancel both these dice. So we can turn that miss into a strong hit and reset our momentum down to 2. Face danger says on a strong hit you are successful. Take +1 momentum, so immediately back up to 3. Now let's envision this odd scene. And I think like I've got something for it. Maybe it's kind of started to crystallize as this thing happened. So yep, I'm going by the seat of my pants, and it's kind of coming together. So Tio is running towards the wyvern. And the Wranglers are just like watching this. This is insane. They're not going to chase him. Like, why would they? But they are going to sound the alarm. And like, I think one of them is waving a torch to like more guards up on the towers or whatever, and getting their attention. And once like the attention is gotten, the alarm is raised. This kind of gong, this big clanking gong, rings through the area, and any bandit that hears it kind of makes for the fortress. But Tio isn't aware of kind of much of this. He is literally running into the jaws of danger. But he's filled with this kind of newfound sense of fearlessness. And he doesn't know. You think like, maybe it's all nonsense. The fact that he's facing certain death might have given him a false sense of confidence, perhaps. Either way, he is charging towards a wyvern. Its lips are curled to a snarl, like exposing rows of dagger-like teeth. But then the light catches the emerald glass tines that are hanging from its neck. And Tio is right now kind of singular of vision. He focuses not on the instant death awaiting him in the monster's huge mouth, But there, on the tines, he stays low. He zeroes in on the glass. And he enters this almost kind of zen-like state, kind of closing out the chaos around him. He's just going to walk up and grab the glass. It's that simple. What the glass is attached to is irrelevant. He's closing in on the prize. He's really close. Maybe too close. The wyvern rears back, exposing its pale yellow-brown underbelly before lurching forward, snapping its head in Tio's direction. Its jaws are wide, ready to scythe him in two. But Tio, again, focuses on the tines and doesn't lose sight of them. And he ducks, and he collapses into a slide on his knees. And the wyvern's head, this great beast's head, shoots right past him as he slides underneath its body. With one hand, he reaches up, grasping for the tines, hoping his momentum will help pull them free. And it's all going in slow motion, this hyper-focused moment. And it's almost beyond his comprehension that the tines have eluded his grasp. His slide and the wyvern's lurch forward means he overshot quite considerably. And now he is passing under its tail. He missed his chance. He had it, and he missed it. The odds were impossible, but there you go. And then he can feel himself being pulled back violently. This is it. This is how Tio dies. The wyvern has whipped around and grabbed him in its jaws. But there's no pain accompanying that sensation. And he turns to see in his other hand the haft. The haft is pulling him towards the wyvern. And the wyvern has now turned around to face him, but it too is being pulled by the neck as the green tines drag it towards Tio. The fangs of Anatu want to be remade, and the ancient power that governs them is pulling them together with incredible force. The wyvern is resisting, pulling away, but even this huge creature can't fight it. Tio grips on tight. There's a flash of blinding light, then an enormous crack in the air, and he blacks out. And he comes to the sound of, the comforting sound of screams. His vision is sort of kind of hazy, but he tries to kind of dial in where it's all coming from, and he can make out the great shape of the wyvern, and it's kind of frantically moving around the area across the fortress. Tio gets to his feet to see it hunched over something on the floor, maybe kind of 25 meters away. And one of the wranglers he sees kind of step in to jab it with its pole arm, like jabbing it in the ribs. And the beast screeches in pain and turns, leaving what Tio can now see is another dead wrangler that it was feasting on, and focuses on this new problem. And it snaps its jaws closed in a flash, and the top of the wrangler disappears in a mist of scarlet. Up on the walls, the bandits are gathered, and they've been drawn by the alarm, and they are loosing crossbow bolts down on the great beast, infuriating it further. It writhes and turns, pulling at the great chains, pulling them taut until they finally give, bringing huge chunks of masonry and timber from the buildings crashing down into the kind of center of the fortress. It spins around, and its tail launches another bandit into the air, and the crossbow bolts continue to rain down, and there are screams of panic. And Tio is still trying to get his bearings as he staggers. The noise is deafening, the screams, the chains being wrenched from the stone, the roar. And then there's an ominous silence. He realizes the wyvern must have now dispatched all the threats and has now turned its attention to him. This huge, monstrous creature, now apparently free, is stalking slowly forwards. And it gets closer and closer, easily close enough to strike. But it hasn't. And why hasn't it? And the answer is in Tio's left hand. A trident. The fangs of Anatu, ancient and powerful and remade. resonating with an intensity he cannot explain or comprehend. And that is what is keeping it from attacking him. It lowers its head, eyes fixed upon him, deadly but subdued. And now it's time. Tio needs to get the hell out of here. And this could be his only way out. So, let's try and compel a wyvern. So using the Fangs of Anatu, this ancient firstborn artifact, we are going to attempt to convince this thing to fly us out of here. It may sound crazy, that's because it is, but it's what we've got, so that's what we're going to go with. So let's have a look at the move. Compel says when you attempt to persuade someone to do something, envision your approach and roll. And there's some options, and I think this is definitely pacifying. And just so we're clear, the Fangs of Anatu are not going to give us any mechanical benefit, by the way. All that having something like this in hand does is give us narrative permission, I guess, and allows us to do it in the fiction. Without it, we could not do this. We could not make this move. Now, this is a pretty bonkers roll to have to make, but we're going to make it. We are attempting to persuade a horrifying monster to let us ride out of here on its back using a magic fork. So let's roll plus heart, and we have basically no momentum. So you know what? YOLO, fingers crossed. Okay, a weak hit will do. A weak hit has the benefits of a strong hit. It says on a strong hit, yeah, they do what you want or share what you know, take +1 momentum, which we will. That puts us back up to 4. And then in addition, on a weak hit, it says they ask something of you in return, envision what they want. So I feel like this is going to be a very short-term arrangement. Tio is not a firstborn sorcerer. He does not know what he's doing. He does not know the power he wields. He knows it's a powerful thing that he holds in his hand, and that the wyvern will obey, but he does not know to what extent he can actually use this effectively. So the wyvern's going to obey him to a point, right? What that point is, I think we'll find out, and we'll kind of keep that on the back burner. But with the trident held out in front of him, Tio slowly approaches and kind of tries to will this thing with his mind to comply with his demands. And it does. It lowers its great neck in deference to Tio as he cautiously moves around. And it's been peppered. This poor thing has been peppered with like crossbow bolts. And there is still a length of chain kind of like held around its like kind of great heaving rib cage. And this is kind of what Tio's going to have to use to cling on to. He centers himself, takes a deep breath, and mounts the beast, hauling himself up, swinging his leg over its ridged spine. And as he does, it stands, and it extends its wings to their fullest. And now, completely unbound, the true size and scale of this majestic creature is clear. More guards have now made it to the walls to replace their fallen comrades, readying their crossbows. Not wanting to hang around, Tio thrusts the trident forwards in the direction of the sky, and the wyvern beats its bat-like wings and lifts them up into the clouds. So that was exciting, wasn't it? That was a good little conclusion to that part of it. We've got a ride back to Mournstone now, so that is a bonus, isn't it? So I think we can probably update our vow. We have the Fangs of Anatu in our possession now, so I think that counts as acquiring a vital resource. And that bit of progress takes us up to 8 out of 10, and we could end it here. The quest is to retrieve the Fangs, so we actually technically could hang on until we are back in Mournstone. And give ourselves kind of 10 out of 10 progress, perhaps. But you know what? I think I am just going to do it now. We're in the end game, so let's do it. I have 8 progress. So let's roll to fulfill our vow. which is a progress move, which says when you achieve what you believe to be the fulfillment of your vow, roll the challenge dice and compare to your progress. Our progress is 8. Momentum is ignored on the roll. So let's roll to fulfill our vow against a progress of 8. That is a strong hit, which is good. It says on a strong hit, your quest is complete, which is nice, I guess. We've still got a ways to go. It may seem like we have just pulled off the impossible. We may have infiltrated an enemy fortress, evaded dozens, if not 100 odd bandits, and tamed a wyvern. But unfortunately, we're not done, because that's not even why we're here. We have to return to Mournstone, and we have to use this artifact to fight a bigger monster, an even greater threat. By stealing the wyvern away from those bandits, that's just given us the opportunity. And actually, as a kind of side point, Tio has inadvertently done this region of the Ironlands a massive favour, because that bandit operation was going to cause some real problems. So he's actually done an act of heroism for the day, unintentionally. And he can't feel too good about it, because I think right now he is struggling to actually just hang on, struggling to control the wyvern as it's enjoying its freedom, kind of roaring into the night sky. And as much as it kind of tries to resist his control, Tio manages to get it going in what he thinks is the direction back to Mournstone. And he does kind of eventually kind of get it to do what he wants. But it's hard. He has to contend with freezing temperatures in the air and traveling at breakneck speed. I don't think Tio is the kind of person who's even comfortable on a horse, let alone a wyvern. But as long as he has the trident, as long as he can keep hold of it, he can keep the wyvern just about in line. But the wyvern is also, like I said, thrilled to be free. It's enjoying spreading its wings after God knows however long in captivity. And it's back where it belongs, in the wild. And I think it's gleefully spinning and dive bombing through the air, kind of skimming the water. And the whole affair would be very exhilarating if Tio wasn't so terrified. And every now and then the wyvern lets out this kind of mighty, rasping roar that echoes through the landscape. And down on the water, Kuno stops rowing. She's tired and it's dark, but she's got to keep going. But that roar from above is the first noise that she's heard in hours. And somehow, she's not 100% sure how, she knows it has something to do with Tio. She curses herself for stopping, takes up her oars, and puts her back into it. She has a community to return to. And Tio has been so busy holding on for dear life that he didn't see Kuno. And also, he hasn't particularly noticed the night has given way to day. When I say day, I mean just a kind of slightly lighter, greyer version of night. And he's far too busy clinging on to notice an unusual craft down on the water. A large, square raft adrift in the sea. And on it, the Leviathan cult have strapped themselves on board. With no other blood to spare, they have decided they must make the ultimate sacrifice. And then down on the dock in Mournstone, Asher Lestara, the warden of this whaling village, arm in a sling, head heavily bandaged, covering most of the left side of her face, staggers uneasily into a small dinghy. The town has been razed to the ground. The skeletal wooden frames of the buildings tell a short and violent story. Only the watchtower still stands, but its ancient stone is blackened by fire. Asher uses all her strength to push the boat away from the dock, rowing slowly with her one good arm through the mist, her face set with grim determination, stoic to the end she knows is about to come. There's a torch in a sconce on the keel of the boat, offering some light, but other than that, she is alone in the gloom, rowing to face down an ancient horror, without the weapon that has kept this town safe for generations. She swore a vow to protect this place, And with the sword at her hip, that's exactly what she's going to do. And as she rows slowly out to face her certain death, she hears a mighty roar in the distance, coming from somewhere high up above. She looks up to see the clouds darken above her. In the clouds, Tio is straining to see who is down on the water, but he figures it must be her. He tries to steer the wyvern down in her direction. So about that weak hit we rolled on Compel. Now, as much as the wyvern isn't going to ask anything of us per se, because it's a wyvern, I said that it just wanted its freedom, right? So I'm kind of thinking to play into the spirit of that roll and that weak hit, maybe this is the end of the line. And maybe as Tio is trying to coerce this thing into moving where he wants it to go, this kind of, as he's right at the end of his journey, kind of back near where Moorstone is, he can see Asher down below. Maybe, like, this wild animal has taken him just about as far as it wants to take him. And maybe as Tio shifts forward to kind of see if it's Asher down in the water and kind of point his trident in the direction, maybe the wyvern sort of kind of shakes him off. Like, not enough to, like, violently buck him off or throw him completely, but enough to unbalance him. And as they kind of get lowish down to the water, Tio kind of has a choice between the trident and the chain around the wyvern's body, and Tio clings on tightest to the fangs of Anatu and falls from his steed. And it's only, let's say, 30 or 40 meters, I say only, but he's falling at pretty high speed into the water below. And, put yourself in Asher's shoes here. That's a weird sight. She just hears a roar, turns to see a wyvern descend from above, and then deposit someone that looks a lot like Tio into the sea. And after Tio hits the water, he kind of having braced for the impact the best he could, he flounders. He is trying desperately to cling on to the trident. And that's hard enough, having just been dropped into the sea from a great height. But also, the water is freezing. And the shock and the cold is making it harder and harder to get the blood pumping to his limbs. And he can feel his fingers starting to peel away from the haft. And as he's struggling, as his body is seizing up and his air supply is dwindling, he can see something in the distance. The water is very clear here, and what little of the sun's light penetrates the surface catches the outline of something lurking ominously a few hundred meters in the distance. And that's when Tio knows. The Leviathan is back, right on cue, here to stake claim to these waters. And he can feel himself start to panic before a hand reaches down and hauls him upwards, out of the water and into a boat. Asher stands over Tio, wet, shivering, and skin turned almost translucent by the shock and cold. And she says, "You took your time." She pulls him to his feet, and she shrugs off her furs, wraps them around him, rubbing his arms, trying to get the blood moving into his limbs. And he's shuddering, and still he clings onto the trident, which Asher kind of sees in his hand, and she very nearly cracks a smile at the sight of it. But, she's a fairly grim-faced person. Doesn't quite end up doing so. And Tio hasn't got much time to come to his senses before she is, hauling him to the front of the boat, to the prow, moving him into position, and she takes up the oar again and starts rowing into open water. And Tio is having to kind of get up to speed real quick. He's scouring the water up ahead. He knows that if the Leviathan even just kind of passed them at any speed, it would capsize the boat easily. And trident or not, they would be quite literally dead in the water. And as the kind of feeling starts to return to his hands, his extremities and his lungs are able to pull in the required amount of oxygen, he plunges the trident into the water. And a matter of seconds later, he sees a disturbance about 50 meters away as the Leviathan thinks better of coming in any closer. It's been warded off by whatever strange energy the fangs radiate. So what's happening here in game terms? Are we going to fight this thing? I kind of think we're going to have to, because Maybe this pattern repeats itself for a few minutes, like the Leviathan moves in a bit closer, then Tio wards it off with the trident, but it's persistent, right? It's not leaving, it's not going anywhere. Maybe it can sense their vulnerability, perhaps. Maybe after decades of this, it's growing bolder or more desperate, or perhaps the power of the fangs is waning. Whatever it is, this thing isn't giving up. So Tio reckons maybe they're going to have to try and strike it with the trident. Maybe that's the only thing that will get it to flee. But how are they going to do that? Well, first, I think if we're going to fight it, we need to make a move, and that move is Enter the Fray, which says, when you enter into combat, set the rank of each of your foes. Now, according to the book, the Leviathan is an epic foe. And may I remind you, if you need it, this is a picture of the Leviathan, and this is the sort of scale we're dealing with here. So, an epic foe will pretty much instantly kill you if it hits you, and at epic difficulty, we are looking at having to hit it like a lot of times. Like if we rolled a strong hit on a strike, that would do 3 harm. And for an epic foe, you mark 1 tick per harm. So every strong hit would not quite fill 1 box, meaning we need 2 strong hits to fill a box and a half. So 4 strong hits would fill 3 boxes, meaning that 8 strong hits on a strike would fill 6 boxes, which is about the point at which you would consider trying to get lucky on an end the fight roll. So assuming we could somehow roll 8 strong hits in a row, fill 6 boxes, and then get lucky on the roll, it doesn't really seem like very good odds to me. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to use a bit of good old-fashioned fictional framing. And I'm going to say that just having the fangs of an R2 is going to give us a fighting chance. And I think that wielding this incredibly powerful firstborn artifact is going to allow us to reduce the difficulty of this encounter. And I'm going to say that to give us any sort of shot here, we are going to take this down to formidable, which I think works for the situation we're in, because we can maybe get lucky and hit this thing a few times and try and take it out. But at the same time, we don't kind of like diminish this thing's power, because if it hits us once, we're dead, because it will do 3 harm, which is currently more than enough to do for Tio. So I don't know, maybe there's another way of doing this. You could probably make like a custom asset for the Fangs of an R2, but frankly, I can't work Photoshop and I don't know how. So we'll just go with this. So we have to enter the fray. How are we doing so, and who is in control? So I think this is, once again, a test of bravery, isn't it? Our assets won't help us. Mila doesn't give a fuck. She's cheering for the monster, if anything. So let's enter the fray, and we'll be doing so rolling plus heart. Yes. Okay. Tio, with his weakest suits, is coming up trumps, I guess. That's a strong hit. On a strong hit, it says take +2 momentum, and you have initiative. We are up to 6 momentum. So just a general thought, like, how is this fight going to happen? It will be kind of weird and stretching the fiction to the point of breaking if we just sit on the boat and wait for it to swim near us and just kind of keep stabbing it. And that's also boring. So I'm kind of wondering if we can play into the fact that the fangs might have some kind of different kind of powerful magic effect, like do some kind of different damage to it, like psychic damage or something. I don't know. Or maybe like the harm we inflict will be enough to like not just kill it physically, but to drive it off for good and break its stranglehold on this region. Maybe that's what defeating this thing means, not actually killing it, just driving it off. Maybe we've got to get there first. So let's see. For now, we need to, because we've got control, we need to unleash some sort of opening salvo. We need to get a hit in, and we need to draw first blood. So I wonder if we might try and lure this thing in, maybe. It might seem dangerous, but, you know, why break the habit of a lifetime? If we know if we put the trident in the water, it doesn't like it and it kind of swims away a bit. So why don't we keep the trident out of the water and maybe see if we can kind of bait it into rushing us, and maybe we could like get a clean hit on it, perhaps. And yeah, saying that out loud sounds insane. But it's what we've got. I've said we're going to do it, so we're going to do it. So to lure it in, we are going to make a move, and that move is going to be, once again, secure an advantage. And we're going to be tricking it, kind of luring it in. So I think we're going to be securing an advantage rolling plus shadow. It's a weak hit. That'll do, I guess. On a weak hit, your advantage is short-lived. Take +1 momentum, which is better than nothing. So that puts us up to 7. And let's envision it. Tio takes the fangs out of the water, kind of freeing the Leviathan up to move closer. And it turns out this beast does not need a second invitation to move in, because almost instantly there is this great disturbance in the water, and the top of its blue-grey reptilian head breaks the surface and heads towards them at a frankly alarming rate. And Asher steadies herself with her sword drawn, and Tio waits, poised with the trident. He holds on longer than is sensible, than is reasonable, than is sane even, before he stabs the trident down into the water, with the ancient beast no more than 10 meters away from smashing their boat into smithereens. And this is going to be a move, which is strike, which says when you have the initiative, which we do, and attack in close quarters, roll plus iron. Now, iron isn't our strong suit, but none of this is, frankly. We are somewhat out of our element, I don't know if you've noticed, but needs must. So, let us strike, rolling plus iron. That's another strong hit. I mean, I thought this thing was supposed to be, tough. I feel like this is frankly embarrassing. On a strong hit, inflict +1 harm and you retain initiative. So, with our weapon, we inflict 2 harm, plus a bonus harm for the strong hit. And a formidable foe is 1 progress per harm, so that takes us up to 3 out of 10. And crucially, we still have initiative, so that's great. So, I think that literally the split second, like the instant the tines break the surface of the water with the Leviathan near, the water sort of lights up and almost pops and spits like when you pour hot oil into liquid. And there's this buzzing that shoots up the haft of the trident, and it sends Tio kind of stumbling backwards, and Asher has to kind of catch him from going overboard. And it takes them a moment to realize what's happened, but they look under the water and below the boat, and they can see the huge shape of the Leviathan passing below, motionless. And it starts to sort of rise up and roll over and float upwards as if it's dead, before it kind of rights itself with a start and pushes up a wave that nearly tips the boat. And it then swishes its long tail and powerful body and swims away quickly. And they realize that the trident stunned this gargantuan creature. It stunned it, albeit only briefly. But the true power of this weapon is now dawning on Tio and Asher. And I think that in this instance, they would try and press the advantage. And Tio motions for Asher, row in the direction of the thing. And before it can kind of turn around for another run at the boat, they're going to go towards it. Tio is emboldened. He is leaning over the prow of the boat, trident raised, ready to strike this thing again. And this time he knows that the power surge is coming, and he can kind of brace himself. And if they can stun it again like that, then hopefully he can take advantage of the fact that this thing is kind of immobile, and he can strike a blow whilst it can't defend itself. So we're sort of charging this monster now, at full ramming speed, because Tio's confidence is high, and maybe it's the ancient power coursing through his veins, but he suddenly feels invincible, and we are going right for this thing. And once again, we are ready to strike, rolling plus iron. Well, who could possibly have foreseen this? Nothing I can do with my momentum against an 8 and a 9, so we are just going to have to eat this one and hopefully not get eaten ourselves. So on a miss, your attack fails and you must pay the price. Your foe has initiative. So I think we might have underestimated the smarts of this thing. It definitely won't fall for the same trick twice, and I think a split second before the trident hits the water, it changes direction sharply, and it turns away and brings its huge tail fin round, crashing through the water, sending this powerful wave that just kind of swamps the boat, and it's instantly overturned and sends both Tio and Asher overboard. And we need to pay the price. And there's a pay the price table. And I think that rather than roll, I'll just pick, because they're all good options, and you don't have to roll, you can do what you want. But the option that is jumping out at me here is you are separated from something or someone. Now, I don't think it's something, because losing the trident would be bad. So I think that in the commotion and in the kind of the ensuing panic, Tio tries frantically to get back to the overturned boat, and with no little effort hauls himself up. But he can see that Asher has been knocked some considerable distance away, and she is flailing. She is trying to keep her head above the surface. And even worse, Tio can see the Leviathan once again turning, coming back for another pass. And I think he doesn't really have a choice but to try and get it to come to him. I think he would try and draw it away from Asher. And I think to do that, he's just going to try and make some noise. I think he's going to start thumping on the underside of the boat with the haft of the trident and try and get this thing's attention. And that's going to be face danger. Now, it could be trickery, rolling plus shadow. It absolutely could. But I think this is kind of a different situation. And I think that this is going to be plus heart again, because it's using courage. Because essentially I'm trying to get this thing to attack me rather than her. So I think that's a brave thing to do rather than kind of a sneaky bit of trickery. So let's face danger, rolling plus heart. That is another miss. It says on a miss you fail, or your progress is undermined by a dramatic and costly turn of events. Pay the price. Okay, so I think there's only one thing that happens here. I think that Tio is hollering and banging to try and get this thing's attention, trying to draw it away from Asher. But he can see the water darken beneath her. It is not falling for it. He screams for her, he tries to warn her, but she knows. She has her sword drawn, held high, ready to strike. And she screams a mighty war cry as she plunges the sword down, but the water boils around her, and Tio sees her lifted up and out of the foam in the Leviathan's mighty jaws. She's swinging away with her sword, fighting to the very last. But in an instant, the beast rolls back under the water, and she's gone. And I think we'll also, in addition, take a hit to our spirit, because that wasn't easy to watch. So we'll nudge that down to 2. And then once again, we'll try and endure stress. So we will roll plus spirit or plus heart, whichever is higher. So that's going to be rolling plus spirit. So let's endure stress, rolling plus spirit. A weak hit, which does nothing. It says on a weak hit, you press on. So nothing doing here. So things are bad. We are in real trouble. So I think I'm going to have to try something appropriately desperate. And I am going to try and make a move called Turn the Tide. Now, this move doesn't have an equivalent in Starforge. So some of you who have come to this channel, just from Starforge, won't have seen this before. Turn the Tide says, once per fight, when you risk it all, you may steal initiative from your foe to make a move, not a progress move. When you do, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. So it is a high risk, high reward maneuver, and I think we're just going to have to do it. We are going to try and steal the initiative and make the move strike. And if we can get a strong hit on that, I think I'm just going to have to try and end the fight and get lucky. So I think we are down to our last out. It is the bottom of the 9th. Tio is realizing that with Asher gone, he has no hope of surviving this. So he's going to have to have his kind of Chief Brody smile you son of a bitch moment. He is going to let this monster come at him, and he is going to have to hang on longer than he knows is safe. And then he is going to be waiting until he can literally see down this thing's throat and throw the fangs of Anato in, hoping that somehow there is some ancient firstborn magic contained within the teeth and the emerald tines of that trident that will be powerful enough to kill the Leviathan outright or drive it off for good. So that's our plan. So having devoured the Warden of Mournstone, The formidable creature turns once again. Now, it only has this mere mortal and his trident standing between it and total dominion over this region's waters, and it powers its mighty body through the water, closing the distance in seconds. Tio gets to his feet on the boat, stands tall, holding the trident like a javelin, ready to launch it down the Leviathan's gullet. He waits, and he waits, and it is getting closer, but still he waits, he holds, he waits for that moment, and the second the long, scaly snout breaks the surface, he flings the trident with all his might. Now we have the initiative from Turn the Tide. We are going to strike. We are hitting at range this time, so we are striking, rolling, plus edge. And even with the +1, we can't beat it, and our momentum isn't going to help us either. It says if you fail to score a hit on that move, you must suffer a dire outcome and pay the price. So Tio has pushed his luck about as far as it can go. Since starting on this quest, he has taken chance after chance and gotten away with it. But he is finally out of lives. This thing is formidable. It does 3 harm. We have 3 health. Let's envision this. At the instant that Tio brings his arm down to release the trident, he sees something. A flash. A vision. Only for a second. An instant. He sees Mila. Not the disembodied spectral form she is in now, but as she used to be. It's just a flash, and then it's gone. But that's more than enough to throw Tio momentarily. Enough that he sees the trident leave his grasp and sail high and wide of its target. The ancient artifact was now lost to the sea, and the Leviathan dives. It was the only thing that could drive this beast away. He had it in his hands. He had gone through hell to get it, but now it was sinking like a stone to the bottom of the ocean. He looks down into the water and can see the shape of the Leviathan circling, then rising quickly beneath the boat. Its titanic scale, terrifying and humbling. In a second, he would be dead, but he catches sight of something in the reflection on the surface. A crow circles above him. He turns to look at it, slowly gliding on the sea breeze. He watches it for a second, and then the water explodes around the boat, and the great jaws of the Leviathan close around him. Tio awakes, sweating, gasping for breath. He's in Mournstone, in the bunkhouse. He's in one piece. His heart is racing. Out of the corner of his eye, he can sense her, the presence. It never stopped being frightening. She never ever showed herself, but he always knew when she was there, and he always could hear her. Mila's spirit says, "Bad dream." And Tio says, "They always are."